and we love to teach people about the Bible. But we have to remember that providing Bible education for its own sake is not our primary goal. In fact, it could be a side road. The fact is, some people who value Bible education are not interested in becoming baptized disciples of Jesus. The world's full of Bible scholars who are highly educated in the Bible, but who do not become disciples of Christ Jesus. For example, one Bible scholar was educated at a Bible institute, a religious college, and a theological seminary. He holds a doctorate in religious studies. He has a thorough knowledge of biblical Greek, and he's written 30 books about the Bible. Yet he describes himself as an agnostic atheist. So just providing Bible education is not our primary goal. We want people to build faith in God and to have their own relationship with Jehovah that will move them toward the destination of dedication and baptism.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Aren't you glad today's a rest day?
Yes, I am. And guess what? Tomorrow's a rest day, too.
I hate the time change.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. Now, before we get into this and that clip that is just so much in there, I want to apologize to Kingdom Hall Insider because I forgot to mention that they had sent me a copy of that letter also. So I apologize for getting you, and thank you for the information you had sent.
Yes, and thanks everybody for the information that you are sending, your research that you are sending. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah. Now, first thing I want to mention from that clip is right at the beginning. He says teaching the Bible is not their primary goal. Isn't this the primary goal of all Christians? If you call yourself a Christian, shouldn't your primary goal be teaching the Bible? And he says it could be a side road? I was like, wow.
Well, what you have to recognize, what this governing body member, Mr. Potato Head number 2, is doing, is that because they are going after a real Bible scholar, they're throwing their hat in the ring with the professional Christian apologists, because that's what they all do. I'm not going to give you the guy's name right now because Kim and I are very certain of who they are referring to, because when Kim was listening to this broadcast for another reason, which we're going to explain in just a moment here, and thanks to our source Atlantis for sending another article that debunks what Watchtower is doing about child baptism. But the point being is that I have watched multiple lectures from this particular Bible scholar, along with Christine Hayes. She is also a Bible scholar teaching with the Yale University, but her expertise is the Old Testament.
If you go to YouTube, put in Yale Courses, Christine Hayes.
Yes, because like he said, their primary goal is not teaching the Bible. And if any of you friends will go over and visit XJW Elder's wife, Jane Doe, visit her channel. She makes some very, very good points that it's like, wow, I never thought of this. But she's 100% right. Watchtower teaches Bible topics, which allows them to pick and choose whatever scripture fits their topic. It doesn't matter what it is. Now, I've got a couple of things that I want to show from the New World Translation, how it's very important to read everything in context. Because when you recognize what Watchtower is doing, and a lot of these other religious groups only teaching a topic, you miss so much more information. And thanks to this Bible scholar and his method of reading the Bible and teaching, you know, what he has learned and everything else, I have been able to take that and even read Revelation chapter 2 and pick out the fact that Jesus Christ is actually condemning the Apostle Paul's teaching that it's okay to eat food sacrificed to idols. So you've got a direct, huge contradiction, even in that setting. So that's why it's important to look at both sides of the issue here and not jump into the professional apologetics like Watchtower is doing here. But see, Watchtower isn't going to go any further than this right here, because they know damn well that their organization is on shaky ground. So they're not going to give you, Jehovah's Witnesses, the name of this real Bible scholar, because what's happening, and it's very, very apparent, that when Kim and I first started doing videos against Watchtower, all of the young were leaving. Why? Because they were internet computer savvy. It takes some of us older ones a little bit longer to catch on, but it's happening. Allie's Big Toe, that channel, she's interviewing her 74-year-old JW Pioneer mother who woke up. Jane Doe, 70-something, 71 years old, I think she is.
Well, we've been contacted by several older ones. John Newsom. I mean, there's so many older ones that are waking up.
The channel, I Lit a Candle, in her mid-70s. You see, Watchtower, what's happening is now the older ones are getting to be computer, tech savvy. They're no longer afraid to go on the internet. So this is why you're not going to name this Bible scholar, because you know good and well that your organization is on shaky ground so much right now that it would be even more damning to your organization, especially among the older ones now.
Now, before we get into what Atlantis sent us here, this article, I just want to mention that Sanderson here in this clip also mentions that this Bible scholar is an agnostic atheist. Sanderson, all of you guys, go to your library, get a dictionary, and look up the difference, because this is actually an oxymoron. An agnostic and atheist are not included in the same frame.
They're not compatible terms put together.
Yeah, I mean, and when you look at the definition, atheism is about belief, or specifically what you don't believe. An atheist doesn't believe in any gods, not even Satan or Lucifer.
Yeah, but see, there again, it just goes to qualify that Watchtower is now throwing their hat into the ring with the professional apologists, and they have to come up with another terminology, another label to direct hate. That's all that is.
Now, agnostic means that you don't know if any gods exist or not. There may be a god, but he may not care, or get involved in humankind's affairs. So you see, this is two different things. So for Sanderson to say that this Bible scholar is an agnostic atheist, get a dictionary, look it up. You look like a moron.
They are.
All right. Now, the article that Atlantis sent to us. Now, we had done a video, or if I did it by myself, I don't remember, about baptism.
I was having a day off.
A rest
I was
day.
having a rest day, yeah.
Yeah. About baptism and how children, they're, pushing for children to get baptized in this May broadcast. And that's how I found this. I was looking for, the clip for that other video. And we know for a fact that children as young as 6, 7, and 8 are getting baptized as Jehovah's Witnesses. And like I mentioned in there, even the Mormons, 8 is the age for the Mormon kids to get baptized, but yet they can't leave until they're 18. So there's this whole thing about child baptism, and I will remind you, Jesus did not get baptized, apparently, until he was 30. He was of age and knew better. But Atlantis, I swear, that he can find an article or something about anything.
Yes, he can.
Anything. And I mean, he's so good at getting back to us.
See, this is the difference between scholarly work and independent research, guys, because what Kim and I do is independent research. What our source Atlantis does here, independent research. And independent research is just as valid as scholarly work. The only difference is you don't have a plaque up on the wall saying, well, I completed this course, I completed that course, so now I'm the high-paying scholar.
Exactly.
So keep up the independent research because it has absolute value.
Yes. Now this is from the Watchtower Bond Volume, 1957, November 1st. Page 643, there's an article called Can You Wait? First paragraph, patience is not the possession of children.
Especially when your mom and dad are hanging baptism over your head in lieu of you getting a driver's license. So you're going to get baptized because you want that driver's license because you're too impatient to wait for that driver's license.
Well, our daughter Shyla did that. You know, the minute she could get her driver's license or learner's permit, we realized she did not have the certified birth certificate, the real registered birth certificate. And she wanted her learner's permit so bad that day, her dad drove her all the way down to Phoenix, which was about a 2-hour trip one way, just to get her registered birth certificate so she could get her learner's permit. But see, that's how children are. They're just so impatient. So impatient. So, I'm going to go down to paragraph 2. Children live for the present, not for the future. This is the difference between an immature outlook on life and a mature one. A mature adult will plan for the future and is willing to wait patiently until his plans are realized. Now, this is a good article, you know, talking about baptism because this is how children are. So how can they possibly know at 6, 7, 8 years old?
Or even 15 and 16.
And plan for the future? They can't. They can't see beyond today. Oh, well, my parents want me to get baptized. That's all they know. They really don't have a deep understanding of Jehovah's Witness doctrines.
Well, yeah, because teaching the Bible is not their primary goal.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, back to the paragraph. But not so with children. They do not think in terms of the many years of living ahead of them. It seems difficult for a young mind to understand that time does not stand still. And that's so true. You know, they live in the present. Okay, going to the first paragraph on the top on the second column. Many adults are like children. Yeah, they never learn to wait. When they want something, they must have it at once, not later. And we live in a society where it's like, I want it now.
Well, go back and look at, you know, the growth of Watchtower pre-1975. See, you can't get into the new system unless you become a baptized, dedicated servant of Jehovah working with his organization. So all those people immediately got baptized, my mother included, without patiently researching the whole scope of what the Watchtower Babel Crap Society truly is.
There was an urgency back then.
Yeah, there wasn't any patience on the part of those people coming in. And then guess what, Watchtower? I know what happened when 1975 came and went. Your numbers tanked.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. If they are told about something to come a number of years in the future, they are not interested.
That's why Armageddon's always just around the corner for Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
That's why it's always around the corner. See, brothers, you don't have to wait long for you to start growing young again. You don't have to wait long because Armageddon and that new system is just around the corner. You are pushing impatience, Watchtower.
Well, then this next sentence applies to all of them. They have not learned to wait. See, that's what's wrong, is we haven't been patient enough to wait for Armageddon.
That's right.
We've been waiting 49 years, 42 years. We're not patient to wait.
And in Bonnie's case, over 50. And in a lot of cases, over 50, 60 years. You people just are not patient.
Their actions reveal this immature trait in many ways. I'm going to go down to the last full paragraph on this page. Children are good examples of this. The child that is giving what it demands appreciates nothing it receives. So, when a child is baptized that young, I still feel that they do not know what fully they're getting into. And I can go by my own experience. Mike and I were actually married in 1979 in September, and then we didn't get baptized together until December of 1979. And at 16 years old, I didn't fully understand. I hadn't really done any studying. I hadn't really read the Bible that I can remember. I didn't know what Watchtower was all about. All I knew is going to the meetings and them saying from the platform, and at conventions and memorials, and my parents telling me that this was the truth and we needed to obey Jehovah.
Right.
So even at 16, that's all a child understands is obey no matter what, and you need to get baptized to get saved. That's all you know.
Okay, now again, thank you, Atlantis, for that article, because it's really showing the self-condemning nature of Watchtower. And like I've said before, when these guys write an article, when they do a broadcast, they don't know what they've written in the past. That's why it's so easy to mock them the way I do, at least. And that's what's going to happen right now, Watchtower, is you're going to get mocked.
Well, it's what goes around comes around. What you have been sowing,
you're going to reap.
Yeah.
So this governing body member gets in front of the camera and he points out this particular person's credentials. Now this is very good for me, because those of you that have been with this channel for a long time, you will note, or have noted on more than one occasion, we have covered the article from the March 1st, 1981 Watchtower entitled, "Do You Appreciate the Faithful and Discreet Slave?" And it wasn't too long ago when one of the other governing idiots got in front of the camera and said, "Well, we're not inspired, we're not infallible, but do you trust the faithful slave? Jesus does." But what you guys don't recognize about that article, "Do you appreciate the faithful and discreet slave?" Over on page 27, they have a side column that's entitled "Overwhelming Credentials." and I've mocked the stuffing out of this particular list of credentials. And one of my favorite things is, hey, Eagles. What the idiots did when they wrote this article is they just took one little scripture at Genesis 7:7 and credential number 1, Noah's wife.
They don't give any explanation, and you can do a search of our old videos. We've done several videos about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's a freaking joke. It's got to be a joke, Watchtower, because nobody can have a list of credentials like Noah's wife. Okay, credential number 2, angel sent to Lot.
Dear, it doesn't have to make sense. It's Watchtower.
It's Watchtower, yeah. I mean, okay, credential number 51, beggar Lazarus. What the hell is that doing in a list of credentials, Watchtower? See, your scholarly work is very, very shallow. I mean, that's not even classified as independent research, for Christ's sake. It's freaking ridiculous. And then you've got the nerve. To call out the credentials of Bart Ehrman. You've really got the nerve to do that? Look, friends, this book right here that Bart Ehrman wrote, Lost Christianities, I recommend you get this, because then you'll understand the battle that was taking place between the Gnostic Christians. That's right, they were called Gnostic Christians.
The sect of Nicholas, the Nazarites, I mean, there were so many, the Ebionites.
Exactly, there were so many groups of Christians. And you don't even really need to get in depth into this book to understand that, because wasn't the Apostle Paul that wrote, well, I belong to the sect of this, I belong to that sect. That whole storyline of the gospel is different sects. Go and read somewhere in Acts about the sect of the Nazarenes. That was another. Wait a minute, the sect of the wasn't Jesus a Nazarene? Wasn't Peter a Nazarene? Wasn't John the Baptist being cousin to Jesus? He would have been a Nazarene. So you've got the sect of the Nazarene. But see, what you guys don't understand is that the only reason why Orthodox Christianity emerged, number one, is because they murdered, that's right, they murdered everybody that stood in their way.
Yeah.
Even Marcion. See, I got mocked by a Christian apologist in this community because I was referring to Marcion. I was, you're a heretic, yada, yada, yada. I would have never ever learned anything about those groups, those early Christian groups. And guess what, Jehovah's Witnesses? Your modern day canonized Bible was not the first set of scriptures put together in a book form. It was not.
Marcion did one.
Marcion did one, exactly.
And what's interesting about Bart Ehrman is that he was a full-blown Christian. He went to college to become a pastor. He went to seminary college, and that's where he woke up, because they were telling him things that he had never heard before, and oh, well, don't tell this to your congregation, you know, so that's what woke him up.
And in fact, I even read, I don't recall if it was this book or the Lost Christianities book, but it was one of these books that I read the foreword, and it nearly matched up with this idiot is saying right here, almost word for word.
That's how I recognized it.
That's how Kim recognized it, because I was in the living room, and Kim says, Mike, come and listen to this. Who do you think they're talking about? She never even mentioned a name. And I listened. It's Bart Ehrman. Now, here's the interesting thing, friends. I've watched a lot of Bart Ehrman's lectures, along with Christine Hayes and a few others. One thing that I have come to recognize is that the Christian apologists attack Bart Ehrman. Now, it seems like it's a legitimate attack, but what I see, because I watched the man's lectures, I've read his books, that I see the Christian apologists taking him out of context when they try to discredit Bart Ehrman. But here's the most interesting thing. The atheists will defend Bart Ehrman because the atheists doing videos or recognizing what the professional apologists are doing with Bart Ehrman's work. And why is his work so valuable? Well, you're going to have to read his books yourself and come to your own conclusion. For me, and even Bonnie, XJW Elder's wife, this morning put up another video recognizing Bart Ehrman's work along with other people's work, which are, college scholarly books that I actually have here read, and I've done videos from these books. The problem that Watchtower has is that they have pushed themselves as the most authoritative Bible students on this earth, and it fails every single time. And in fact, friends, if I hadn't if I had not have read In Search of Christian Freedom by Raymond Franz, it would never have really sunk in that, hey, God has allowed man to tamper with the scriptures because he's allowed Watchtower to do it. And Watchtower does it to suit their own agenda. And that comes from In Search of Christian Freedom.
Now, since Watchtower is bashing Bible scholars, specifically Bart Ehrman, we believe, I'm going to bring to their attention some information that they have printed in the past that calls into question their scholarly work. Now, I have the single edition of the Watchtower here, 1950, and it is the December 1st, and on page 469, they have an open letter to a Catholic priest. This is a letter that they wrote to him, and I'm going to cover. I know I've covered this a couple of times, but I found something new. And for those of you who have not seen the older videos we've done mentioning this particular article or letter, I, want to read this again for emphasis in this context that where Watchtower admits they get their shallow scholarship. Page 472, the subheading, the divine name. The last 4 paragraphs of your article are grouped under the heading, Jehovah not correct is God's name. Here you open by saying something of the shallow scholarship in the sect in adopting the word Jehovah as part of its title is shown by the Catholic Biblical Encyclopedia's treatment of this word, ... And your closing paragraph says, we fear that all of the other scholarship of the witnesses, including what they have done in their translation of the New Testament, is on the same basis as their use of the word Jehovah. The next paragraph. Thank you for this opportunity to present some facts to you and to the public. We do not say that Jehovah is the correct pronunciation of God's name. For that matter, neither is Jesus the correct pronunciation of Christ's name. But according to the Aramaic language which Christ and his apostles spoke, his name was pronounced Yeshua, the A representing a guttural ending. But Jesus is only our colloquial way of pronouncing his name, and we do not find fault with you for using it instead of Yeshua. However, if you call it shallow scholarship for the committee to use the word Jehovah in the New World Translation, then you will have to admit that it is due to the shallow scholarship of the Roman Catholic clergy of the 13th century. For in that century, the word historically appears among them.
And all you got to do is look at the 1611 King James Version, Psalms 83:18. There's that name Jehovah.
Yeah, exactly. And even in the old Blue Aid book, they even mention this. And they even have like black and white pictures of that Italian Raimundus Martini from his writings from 1200 and something, which happens to be a Catholic monk. But this is new because I noticed this yesterday when we were actually doing take 1 of this video. Over on page 473, second column, the second full paragraph, about halfway down. So they're talking about Jonah, and a quote from the Grail magazine published in St. Minrod, Indiana, in the February 1949 issue, appeared the article Jonah, God's Problem Prophet, by Philip Dan Stack. In it we read, now the word of Jehovah came upon Jonah, the son of Amittai. So then they go and it says, a fine chance he, an insignificant prophet from Gath Hepher, would stand enforcing penance upon the fabulous Ninevites, who did not even know his own God's name. from page 54 to page 58, now they're talking about this magazine that they're quoting, the Grail, the name Jehovah is used 30 times, twice being spelled Jahve, and the versions from which it is quoting is, mind you, the Westminster version of a Jesuit reverend. To set before Catholic readers, does it not make you blush? This is Watchtower telling this to this Catholic Monsignor. Does it not make you blush to be confronted with such shallow scholarship on the part of Roman Catholic publications and authors in this 20th century? So that's why I'm going to cover a few things. Doesn't it make you blush, Watchtower, that you have this stuff in black and white, and now us activists are using it to throw it back in your face? Now, before I get into more of their Watchtower's Bible scholars, I have to lay a little bit of a foundation, because many of you who are newly out may not know Watchtower's history back to 1954. So I have the 1973 yearbook, page 133, under the subheading, More Action on the Legal Front. In 1953, it was determined that a test case should be prepared to establish whether the society was a religious organization and whether it had regular ministers. Now, if I remember correctly, this went back to the draft and the
Conscientious objectors.
conscientious objectors. Thank you. I hate the time change.
Hey, just keep in mind, tomorrow's a rest day.
Well, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Okay, so about halfway down the first paragraph, Douglas Walsh of Dumbarton, Scotland, was eventually chosen to be, one of these test ministers. He being both a pioneer and a congregation overseer. By the close of 1953, plans were completed and strategy laid for the test case in Scotland. The aim was to determine legally where Jehovah's Witnesses were a religious organization and whether pioneer and congregation overseer Douglas Walsh was a regular minister. In January 1954, a preliminary hearing in Edinburgh determined that Walsh had a relevant case, and Lord Strachan ordered it to go to proof. The case was set down for November 23, 1954. Now, I happen to have the Walsh trial transcript. It's very interesting reading. It's hundreds and hundreds of pages. Well, it's 810 pages. But there's so much information packed into here about Watchtower and how the hierarchy of Watchtower, board member and vice president Frederick Franz, they cross-examined him. In fact, it even says in the next paragraph, the Watchtower Society's vice president, F.W. Franz, from the Brooklyn headquarters, was first to go into the witness box. He outlined from the Bible the beliefs of Jehovah's Witnesses, especially those that differed from Orthodox Christians. And like I said, there's so much packed into this transcript that I could do thousands of videos about it. But I'm going to cover just a few pages.
Now, you have to keep in mind, friends, this was written in the 1973 yearbook. And this is why it's damning for Watchtower today. Because in 1973, where was the internet? Could anybody at that time scan these transcripts and put them on the internet for everybody to see? No, see, Watchtower was very confident, very cocky in writing that. See, the whole Walsh trial and Watchtower makes it look like it was all done in Watchtower's favor until you read the transcripts and you see what a monkey's ass these guys made out of Freddie Franz.
Yeah, I mean, it was almost like the Australian Royal Commission. I wish this Walsh trial, was on video, because it's basically the same thing. Here's Franz, vice president of the Watchtower and Bible Tract Society of Pennsylvania.
That's right, Pennsylvania.
Because even in this transcript, he keeps saying society, society. And they ask him, what society are you talking about? The Watchtower and Bible Tract Society Incorporated. And he says, no, that's the New York corporation. I'm talking about the board in Pennsylvania. So there's some very interesting legalities. And like I said, I'm going to put the link down below to this transcript. Fascinating reading. Too much to go into all today. But on page 7, Frederick Franz is under cross-examined by this Walsh trial. Question: have you also made yourself familiar with Hebrew? Answer: yes. Now remember that. Familiar with Hebrew. Question: do you also know and speak Spanish, Portuguese, and French? Answer: Spanish, Portuguese, and German, but I have a reading knowledge of French. Question: so that you have a substantial linguistic apparatus at your command? Answer: yes, for use in my biblical work. Now, in this testimony, he also admits that him, and he mentions several others who are part of the translating committee of the New World Translation, because it had just come out in 1950. Okay? Question: I think you are able to read and follow the Bible in Hebrew, Greek, Latin, Spanish, Portuguese, German, and French. Answer: yes. Okay? He's able to read and follow the Bible in Hebrew, Greek, and those others. So remember that. Let's see. Then let's go over, because then he talks about the translating committee. Let's go over to page 8. Line A. Question: I think that it was your duty, was it not, before the issue of that New World Translation by your society to check that translation for accuracy? Answer: that is true. Question: in light of your studios and in light of your knowledge? Answer: that is true. Question: and did you do so? Answer: I did so. Now when you go to down to line E, question: and does the society regard it as an authoritative translation of the New Testament scriptures? Answer: yes. So they're laying the groundwork for this New World Translation. And like I said, it's very interesting reading. Over on page 9, section B, question: and was it your duty on behalf of the society to check the translation into English from the original Hebrew of that first volume of the Old Testament scriptures? Answer: yes.
Now, gotta remember, Jehovah's Witnesses, this is Watchtower Scholar. See, this is Watchtower Scholar because when you read the forward of any of your Bibles, they'll tell you, well, we don't want to reveal the names of our translators so that all glory can go to Jehovah. But in this Walsh trial, they have to release those names, and Freddie Franz is one of them.
So that's why I'm laying the groundwork here for his credentials as a Bible scholar.
Eagles.
And what he is testifying under oath, swearing to God, telling the truth about his biblical scholarship. Now also in here, I didn't want to read the whole thing, but it talks about how he was going to go to seminary college, just like Bart Ehrman, and be a minister when he found the truth. Okay?
See, he actually probably realized that he didn't have to learn the Bible as its primary goal.
Yeah, so they're not teaching the Bible as a primary goal.
That's right.
Oy vey. All right, going down to D on page 9. Question: have you in fact received favorable comments on these 2 volumes? Answer: we have. Question: from scholars and theologians who are wholly unconnected with the society? Answer: that is true. If you want something, some interesting viewing from another Bible scholar, go to YouTube and put in Mantey, M-A-N-T-E-Y, in New World Translation or Jehovah's Witnesses, and there's several things that come up. But Mantey actually wrote a letter to Watchtower saying that he had been misquoted, because they said that he was wholly favorable
All right.
to their translation, and he was not.
We actually did a video covering that. In fact, I think we even used clips from that video that's out there on YouTube now.
Yeah, exactly. Now remember what I just read about Freddie Franz understanding Hebrew, Greek, Latin, and all of that, and he was the primary scholar for translating the New World translations from the original manuscripts, the original Hebrew and Greek. Okay, and I'm going to go to page 102 in the transcript. Now they're talking about the name Jehovah, and I'm not going to read this whole page because it's a whole page. Section E. I think we come to the name Jehovah in the 4th verse, don't we, of the 2nd chapter of Genesis, page 34. Answer, yes. Question, you yourself read and speak Hebrew, do you? Now remember, back on page 7, 8, and 9, he testified that he read and understood this.
That's right.
Okay? I'll ask that question again. You yourself read and speak Hebrew, do you? Answer, I do not speak Hebrew. Question, you do not? Answer, no. Question, can you yourself translate that into Hebrew? Now remember, he had testified that he's the one that checked the original
language
in translating the Bible. Answer, which? Question, that 4th verse of the 2nd chapter of Genesis. Answer, you mean here? Question, yes. Answer, no, I won't attempt to do that.
So he lied. He perjured himself under oath.
I know they put him on the spot, and there's some apologists, who in the past have even written books about this trial and have defended Franz. And, oh, well, the poor guy was suffering from dementia. Well, then
in 1953?
What's he doing then, testifying and saying that he does read and understand Hebrew and help translate the New World Translation? But we know from past history that they used the Johannes Gruber translation, and they also used Westcott and Hort. They used several of these manuscripts. They did not do their own from the original languages. So it's just interesting, to cover all of this. And even when you go to page 347 in the transcript, read that, because it talks about unity is more important than truth, doctrine, and if someone disagrees with what is being taught and saying, well, that's not true, they are disfellowshipped. They admit all that. So like I said, this is a fascinating transcript. Just like the Watchtower Royal Commission, it is very damning. And it just points out that while Watchtower is pointing a finger at Bible scholars, there's 3 pointing back at them where they claim to be Bible scholars. And there's even a video on jw.org about the history of the Bible. That's very interesting too.
You see, just got to reflect back to what we pointed to in the beginning. Teaching the Bible is not their primary goal. Their primary goal is to make a disciple.
Get converts.
To get converts. They don't care whether they teach from the Bible or not, because they know that if they truly taught from the Bible, that nobody would believe the nonsense that's in that particular book. So again, March 1st, 1981 Watchtower, Do You Appreciate the Faithful Slave? Over here on page 27, look at the overwhelming credentials. What a flipping joke that is. Credentials. It's just a joke. But I want to bring Watchtower's scholarly research more to the current situation within Watchtower.
Modern day?
Modern day. ex-governing body member Raymond Franz, nephew of the professed reader of Hebrew, and then has to admit he can't read it. This is his nephew.
This is the new version of Christian Crisis of Conscience, and it is available on Amazon now.
Yes. I want to read just a tiny excerpt from page 203, because see, when you read Raymond Franz's work, you will see that he was in charge of getting all of the research together for the Aid book, the Blue Aid to Bible Understanding. Watchtower's flagship for research at that time in history. See, Raymond had to do some research, and look at what he discovered. Page 203. As discussed in a previous chapter, the research I had to do in connection with the book to Aid to Bible Understanding brought home to me that the Society's date of 607 BCE for Jerusalem's destruction by Babylon was contradicted by all known historical evidence. Evidence, Watchtower. Now, when you read his story regarding his research on 607, he went to colleges and he studied their literary work regarding Jerusalem's destruction in 607. But I found this interesting. Still, I continue to put trust in that date in spite of the evidence.
Because that's what Jehovah's Witnesses do.
Do you trust the faithful? See, we're not inspired. We're not infallible. But do you trust the faithful slave? Jesus does.
Well, this tells me that even the governing body,
They know.
If they have doubts and they know they cannot say anything.
They'll put trust in 607 in spite of the evidence, feeling that it had scriptural backing. Without 607 BCE, the crucial date of 1914 would be placed in question.
Yeah?
And we all know that, being ex-members now. That's why they had to come up with the overlapping generation, because 607 failed. Because what they really did is they took Jesus' words of "this generation will not pass away" out of historical context. He goes on, I took the view that the historical evidence was likely defective, and argued that way in the Aid book. Here's a man you can truly appreciate eventually had his personal Armageddon, because when he presented this information to his scholarly uncle, Freddie Franz, who was president at the time, if I remember right, Freddie Franz said, stick with tradition. And we see how that tradition is invalidating your words, isn't it, Watchtower? See, you stuck with tradition and you invalidate your own words.
If you do a search, and if I can remember, I'll write myself a note to put the link to an interview with Raymond Franz after he left, and he talks about some of this too.
Okay, now I want to read what's on page 305. Now, what Raymond puts in his book on page 305 is the opening quotation that you'll find in the Awake magazine.
They're on the inside cover. Boy, isn't that a nice, clear, crisp, high-def scan of those?
Why, yes it is. It's almost like you know who provided these nice, crystal clear scans, dear. Thank you for the privilege of allowing us to help you, making this these scans a lot more clearer for everybody's
Can read them better.
benefit. But this is what's on the inside of the Awake magazine. Why Awake is published. Awake is for the enlightenment of the entire family. It shows how to cope with today's problems. It reports the news, tells about people in many lands, examines religion and science. But it does more. It probes beneath the surface and points to the real meaning behind current events. Yet, it always stays politically neutral and does not exalt one race above the other. Most important, this magazine builds confidence in the Creator's promise of a peaceful and secure new world before the generation that saw the events of 1914 passes away.
And that was used up until October 22nd, 1985.
Yes. Now, after 1985, they changed the last sentence. And that's all I'm going to read is just the last sentence. Most important, this magazine builds confidence in the Creator's promise of a peaceful and secure new world that is about to replace the present wicked, lawless system of things. Notice they had to get rid of the generation that passes away in favor of replace the present wicked, lawless system of things. You invalidate your own work, Watchtower. But see, the problem is that Jehovah's Witness, like my mother, she's not going to read this book, let alone the inside of the Awake magazine, because they all assume they know what it says, and they all assume you're never going to change it to cover the fact that you took Jesus' words about this generation out of historical context.
Well, just like we were all told when Raymond Franz went apostate to get rid of our big blue aid books.
Yeah.
Because it was now apostate.
It was now apostate literature.
Well, you can see now why they had to get rid of it.
Well, yeah.
Because there's stuff in there. You want to hear an interesting coincidence?
Yes,
it
I
just
do.
reminded me about the 607 that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Thomas. Interesting connection. So some of us believe that Russell was a Knights Templar, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that it was October 13th, Friday, October 13th, 1307, when French King Philip IV went after the Knights Templars. Okay, 1307. If you subtract 1307 from 1914, you get 607.
Just do the math.
Interesting.
It's all right there.
Interesting coincidence, huh?
Yeah,
Wink,
coincidence. Wink, wink, exactly. Okay.
It makes you wonder.
Yeah, well, there again, it's esoteric. It's the that's why baptism is for the initiates. It's the secret mystery cults.
Different levels.
The secret mystery schools. And Watchtower is right there among them because they tell you, well, it's not our primary goal to teach the Bible. Then why offer free home Bible studies? No, what you should be doing is offering free home topics of Bible studies and bounce around like you do.
Okay, well, just hear out this scenario. So someone at the door, a witness says, oh, go to jw.org, for any of your questions. Okay, they stumble on the March broadcast. Oh, well, our primary goal is not to teach a Bible. It could be a side road. They're going to be like, what? Well, then why would I accept a home Bible study from these people when it's not their primary goal? That tells me they're not Christians.
Yes.
Just saying.
So, as a Jehovah's Witness, if you're watching this, or a PIMO, or anybody else, I want you to tell me the relationship between Moses and Aaron. Now, right off the top of your head, without having to go to the Bible and read it,
Brothers.
they were brothers. And you're going to remember that Moses was inadequate because he was not a good speaker. He had a speech impediment. So Jehovah assigns Aaron to be the mouthpiece, and both Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh, and you know the rest of the story. Is there anything more to that? Is there something else that you really need to read and put in context so you might start thinking critically? No, you won't do that because you trust the faithful slave. After all, Jesus does, right?
Well, that reminds me of the movie 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston. Didn't he do most of the talking to Pharaoh and not Aaron?
Well, exactly. And, not only that, when you look at Mel Brooks's version, here comes Moses, and God has these 15, and one of them breaks. And God has these 10 commandments. You're going to love Mel Brooks.
I love that version.
Yes.
I love that version.
Okay, so if you guys are curious, go to Exodus chapter 4, because we're going to learn something that was a what the hell does this mean moment for me. Now,
I had never read this before.
Now, XJW's eldest wife did a video regarding some of these chapters in Exodus. So I want to start with verse 10 because it does give the whole setting of Moses and Aaron. Now Moses said to Jehovah, "Excuse me, Jehovah, but I am not a fluent speaker, neither since yesterday, nor since before that, nor since your speaking to your servant, for I am slow in mouth and slow of tongue." Now you all know, Jehovah's Witnesses, that when Watchtower gives a talk regarding Moses, that's about all they're going to read. They're not going to go any further. Okay? Now, at that Jehovah said to him, "Who appointed a mouth for man, or who appoints the speechless, or the deaf, or the clear-sighted, or the blind? Is it not I, Jehovah?" Okay, right there, question number 1. If Jehovah God appoints the language for man, if Jehovah God appoints the speechless, or the deaf, or the clear-sighted, or the blind, if Jehovah gave sight to man, ears to man, and a mouth to speak with, why didn't he just cure Moses' speech impediment right there and then? I mean, after all, in some Christian-based theology, Jesus is Jehovah. So why didn't Jesus right there, pretending to be Almighty God, correct the speech impediment? Why didn't he do that? Do you think about that, Jehovah's Witnesses? When you read... Oh, wait a minute. Damn, you don't read it, do you? You just don't read it because Watchtower knows that when you read, you begin the question. If Jehovah can, make fire appear out of a burning bush and not consume the bush, then why doesn't he miraculously correct Moses' speech impediment? Why? You gotta ask.
It gets better.
Going on. But he said, "Excuse me, Jehovah, but send, please, by the hand of the one whom you are going to send." Then Jehovah's anger grew hot against Moses, and he said, "Is not Aaron the Levite your brother?" How could Aaron be from the Levitical tribe when the nation of Israel is still captive in Egypt and they haven't been divided in the tribes yet?
There wasn't a Levitical...
Oh, the Levi, because he's from the family of Levi.
Yeah, there you go.
But you've got to stop and ask. Because, see, Aaron, in this sentence structure, is already presumed to be the priest. Because Jehovah is appointing him, right? Something's not kosher here, Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay, I do know that he can really speak. And besides, he is on his way out to meet you when he... So Jehovah can speak from a burning bush without consuming the bush. He can predict that Aaron, the Levite, is already on the way, but he can't cure the speech impediment?
It wasn't his will.
You just stick with that, sweetheart. Okay, when he does see you, he will certainly rejoice in his heart. And you must speak to him and put the words in his mouth. And I myself shall prove to be with your mouth and his mouth. And I will teach you men what you are to do. This right here is telling. And he must speak for you to the people. So the he must speak for you is is Aaron speaking for Moses. Let me read that again. And he must speak for you to the people. And it must occur that he will serve as a mouth to you. We all know the story. And you, speaking of Moses, and you will serve as God to him. Capital G. You mean Jehovah appoints Moses as God? Go back and read that, guys. I bet you never read it, and Watchtower is not going to tell you what it's all about. You know why? Because I checked this scripture this very morning in the reference Bible. No explanation. In Hebrew, so they'll throw in Hebrew, this is the word. In the Greek Septuagint, this is the word. There's no explanation. And he will serve as God to him. Moses assumes the title of God.
Boy, that's a big responsibility, basically saying, you represent me, you're God.
Think it
Well, then
it
he would
through.
have cured his own speech impediment.
Well, think it through. What is the ultimate power of God? Life and death. Since there's no recording of Moses bringing anybody back to life, you have just the opposite. You've got a recording of that man arbitrarily slaughtering thousands upon thousands of people that do not listen to him because Moses has let that title God go to his head.
Apparently.
Now, there's something else that you don't see in your scriptures. Go over to Ezekiel chapter 20. And for the sake of time, I want to just drop down. If you start reading at 21, you'll see that the nation of Israel in the wilderness is rebelling against Moses, and all of this. But go down to verse 23. Also, I myself lifted up my hand in an oath to them in the wilderness, to scatter them among the nations and to disperse them among the lands. Is that why there's no historical evidence of the Israelites escaping Egypt and living in the wilderness for 40 years? Is that why there's no evidence? Because they've been scattered and you've really got nothing more than campfire stories? I mean, go back and listen to ex-JW's wife, Jane Doe, to the one she put up this very day. Maybe you could put a link down below. About Jehovah not wanting to walk and poop. You've got 3 million people in the desert. Do you know how much waste 3 million people would be capable of producing in that amount of time? What about the animal waste in that amount of time? There is absolutely no sense to it. But because Watchtower studies topics and not the Bible, because that's not their primary goal, we all have missed so much.
And since our battery's almost dead, I'm going to say thank you, Stacy Lopez. She just did a great video about unwitnessing. The witnesses picked the wrong neighborhood to work in. And I want to thank the YouTube channel Blue Envelope so much. He's done 2 parts now on Stephen Lett and his life story. Thank you so much for that information. I'm not going to say publicly why, but thank you. I appreciate your help very much. So thank you for watching, and you all have a great week.
Bye. And remember, friends, tomorrow's a rest day.
No, it's not.